All right, folks, welcome back to the Colorado Switchblade.
I can't even get it right.
Welcome back to the Colorado Switchblade podcast. This is my big relaunch, and I hope you're getting it. It's it's been a long time. It may be like since the death of my wife a couple years back, a writing partner, since I've done a podcast, and I've never done a video podcast. I'm trying something new this time. I'm seeing how it works out here in my record store. Yeah, totally my record store. But yeah, life it's gotten loud. So yeah, had a new book that just came out. I spent a last year and a half writing. Actually have it right here. Last week came out, AI Inc., Writing, Publishing, and Misinformation at the Dawn of AI. And we'll be talking about that a little later on. I've been doing journalism still, got back into freelance writing after swearing off politics, which, if you're paying attention to anything going on in the news these days, you kind of understand why I may have stepped back a little bit. And I've said that a few times. I know. It's like a junkie saying, never again. But for now, I'm trying to avoid it as best I can. It's just become a dangerous proposition, but I just can't help myself. So I've also had an ankle replacement, like a full prosthetic implant. So it's not like they chopped off my ankle. That was the next step. But I've got like a cyborg ankle now. And if you remember like my testimony back in the day, or, you've seen me at one of my talks, I always walked with a cane, and I don't have to walk with a cane anymore. I'm actually losing weight and getting back into shapes. That's good. I've got some, lots of great things going on. I've got my teenage daughters I'm still raising in the house, and that's just, insanity ratchets it up as they get into their older teens, early 20s. And but you know what? I've been going out there into the community, and I may actually start living in Denver kind of half time. I'm always going to be up here in the mountains, and we're coming to you from literally the most haunted town, little mountain town in the United States, one of them at least, Estes Park, Colorado, where I call my home and little writer's haven, and where I run the Colorado Switchblade out of. And you may not have heard of the Colorado Switchblade if you're new to this and just saw the video podcast and clicked on it. I'm author and writer Jason Van Tatenhove. I may look a little familiar to you because I did testify from the January 6th committee regarding a book I had written called The Perils of Extremism, which we'll go into another time. But kind of a pundit, had been for a bit there on MSNBC and CNN and just all the major news channels. I got a lot of camera time there. So now I just back to, before the craziness ensued, back to just writing and staying in my house as much as possible up here in the mountains of Colorado. It's a good place to be and write. But the reason I'm relaunching this is this week I went out and did a few things. I went and visited the Tattered Cover and brought one of the gals who organizes the author events and helps get books on the shelves and stuff, just showing her my new book, and she loved it. I'll probably be doing some gigs, hopefully, knock on wood, in the future at the Tattered Cover, which, if you're outside of Colorado, it's like the iconic big indie bookstore in Denver and thus the state. So that would be great. And I've been doing some freelance work. I got my first couple of bylines in Westword, and now have a place to write in Denver. When I'm in Denver, I can stop by the offices, and through the connections there with Patty Calhoun, the founding editor and editor-in-chief, I'm not sure exactly what the title is there, but got invited to the Alt Weekly. It was kind of a get together in remembrance. It was at the Denver Press Club, which if you've never been at the Denver Press Club, this is kind of like, some of those old noir mystery movies you'd see, and they'd have, like just crazy furniture from the Art Deco period. It might look like it looks in play, like it would be in play, fit in at like some Illuminati temple or something. I mean, this place has history. It is history. And you walk in the door and you can just feel it dripping down the walls. And it was right after Halloween weekend, and just like it turned out to be a great time. Those of you who follow my work know that, I got my start doing independent underground newspapers and magazines from like the 90s on, early 90s, and started with Color Red, which was an underground music magazine. And I've returned to music writing recently. Mostly I did art direction back then, but had this surprise reunion with the founding cast of a collegiate alternative to CSU's The Collegian, which was the Rocky Mountain Bullhorn, which went on to do great things kind of in that alt weekly realm. And, me and my late wife, Shiloh, helped launch that. I was the original art director and helped to design I actually didn't help to, I designed the logo, the regional logo. And I walk in the door and there are two people. First, I see this gal sitting on the couch and I'm like, God, I know this woman from somewhere. Where do I know her from? And I thought maybe it was from high school. I wasn't too far off. It was in Fort Collins that I remembered her from. And she was Vanessa, who was the editor of the Bullhorn back in the day. And sitting next to her, I didn't recognize Joe because Vanessa aged better than Joe. Sorry, Joe. Vanessa, we both talked about this. She might be a vampire, but man, had this great reunion, like almost a family feeling reunion. And it was just a great event. Got to meet a lot of the legends of the Colorado alt weekly scene and, people I grew up reading. And it was just such a great event. And then, of course, turned into a little bit of bedlam and chaos as the topic of AI was introduced. And of course, having just written a book about AI and having it here in hand, and signing a couple copies before the start of the event, spoke up and talked about how we have to embrace AI to a certain extent. And that's really what my book is about. So it got into a very spirited alt weekly style debate, but it was a lot of reminiscing, a lot of shit talking about previous owners that we had worked for and just some of the crazy situations, whether they be Christmas party events. I can't go into any sort of detail because, it's just not appropriate, but it was just a fantastic event that I wanted to just touch on, that I was just honored to be invited and go to and meet some of these legends and have some reunions with people that I never thought I'd see again. And, I wish that like the old Color Red brothers were still there, or that they had shown up or something, but I don't know if half these people are still alive. It's been so long, but that's kind of what I've been up to recently. What else? I mentioned that I've been writing about music again and doing a little bit of musical writing. I just went and saw the band Flock of Seagulls, which I wrote a great little piece about on the Colorado Switchblade, if you want to check it out, and some great images. But a cool little story is, going to these shows is a great way to get a friend in. And, I put a camera on them and say, this is my photographer. And, it's one of the only fringe benefits we get. And they oftentimes are my photographer. Not always, but often. Plausible deniability. And so I brought my friend Marco, who's, kind of a rock star bartender here in Estes and a good buddy of mine for many years, and had never been to a show like that where you get all access and whatnot. And we walk in and we must have just had that look because we go up and it was at the Stanley. Yes, the Stanley Hotel, the most haunted hotel in America. I could see it from my front porch. And I've been covering some events there. I actually was invited to the Shining Ball, which was quite the experience, just last minute. And thanks, Jesse King, your rock star. And just it must be getting on certain threshold lists at a certain threshold because, suddenly I have Simon and Schuster sending me books hoping I'll write about them. I have, talent agents from New York and LA emailing me asking if I'll cover this show or that, which is great. I love it. It's kind of a nice bookend to the beginning of my career, and I'm happy to do it. I just love writing about music. I won't write about all of it, but the shows that I really like, I certainly will. And so we walk into the upper part of the show house at the Stanley. It's kind of a building that's separate, and they always light it up with these crazy floodlights. And I got to say, those of you who have been following my work know that I've had some issues with specifically the ownership of the Stanley back in the day and how they treated employees at times and some of their policies. And it's the whole reason I wrote my first fiction novel was so I could talk about something that happened during the pandemic lockdowns and not get sued if you wrap it into, a supernatural thriller horror story with monsters and ghosts and such. And it's a lot harder to sue you about talking about an issue, but I can still put the seed of that actual issue in there. So, we've got the Stanley Film Institute now, or the Sundance Film Institute now every year where, new young directors or even old directors come and they learn from the best. They're partnering with Blumhouse Studios and they're pouring millions of dollars into a new film center, which I think is going to be amazing. You know, as much as I've said I've had some disagreements in the past, the new move forward with the state taking things over and the different companies that are now involved in running the Stanley, man, I got to say I'm impressed. I think I've seen some old friends of mine who had worked for the Stanley in past times that have left due to different circumstances, returning happily. And, you know, it seems to be moving in the right direction. And what I got to say is I believe in that project. You know, that Film Institute, the bringing Sundance Film Festival to Boulder, and just how that relationship where Estes Park and Boulder are kind of hand in hand in that creative endeavor to further film in Colorado, I think is just one of the best things that we can do. And that vision, that dream, I've believed in from the start. And I think it's going to open up some great doors for not just, you know, young directors that come in, but, you know, local talent, whether that be writers like myself or storytellers, actors, filmmakers. When you have something like that in such close proximity to local community, there can't help but be some cross-pollination. And I think it's going to be a great thing. Anyway, I get pulled down these rabbit holes. So I went ahead and went up there with Marco, and we go upstairs and we see some guys kind of near the soundboard and decide to go down and get our drinks situated before the show starts. And this guy from the soundboard follows us down and asks us if we happen to be, you know, musicians or rock stars. And we both looked at each other and laughed. And I mentioned that now I'm a music writer and my friend here is a rock star bartender, but that's about the extent of it. Turns out it was a drummer for Flock of Seagulls. And man, we had a great conversation. I think once the tour's over, he had mentioned he wants to have me on his podcast. Apparently he's got quite a podcast of his own, and to talk about the new book that they talk about AI and the creative industries quite a bit. So that should be great. Starting to, do the interview book tour segment of writing the book. I'm not going to say who because I don't want to jinx it, but I do have an interview set up for later this week with one of the top publications in Ireland for a writer's going to do a piece for their book section. Man, things have just been moving. So I just wanted to touch base with my listeners. One of the things that I've run into over the past couple of weeks as I've kind of been out and about in the world and not just hiding away in my writer's bungalow up in the mountains, is I've had several people, 5 or 6 of them, just out of the blue and unconnected, tell me how much they really loved the podcast, that it was just something that listened to regularly and just loved. And that really struck me that maybe it's time for me to relaunch that. And being in the digital age that we are now, a multimedia age, it would help to get more listeners and thus more people supporting my projects, which I'll be honest with you, we need it now more than ever. I mean, just look at the world around us. It's harder and harder to make it as a writer in this world. And so that all helps. So I thought I'd give a stab at doing a video version and putting it up on my Substack and maybe YouTube. So that's really what I have been doing. I also wanted to talk about a few new things that are coming up. So I've talked about the launch of the book, my new book, AI Inc. And I wanted to read a little bit from it and kind of just talk about what it is and what it means to me. Introduce that I'm going to be having a standalone limited podcast that's going to kind of be put out by Skyhorse, my publishers. I think it's going to be a 5-episode limited series where I go and talk with some of the people I interview in the book. You know, these are well-known journalists, at least here in Colorado, authors that are known across the country, if not around the world, some publishers, some agents, but just go over some of the topics and specifically, so kind of as a teaser for the book, but there's a lot that happens. I mean, we know that the world of AI moves at lightning speed. Even from the time I handed in my final manuscript in my last few changes just a few months ago till when it was printed and put out, now it's out on bookshelves. Actually, it's not on bookshelves. The whole system's changed this past year. So one of the things I wanted to ask you, if you are interested in reading this book, please go to your local bookstore and ask them to order it for you. That's the best way for me to get this book, which, you know, we designed this cover so it would look good on the bookshelf and just kind of capture the right people's attention. And it's nowhere in the state of Colorado. So I'm going to every one of these bookstores and introducing myself in person and putting a copy of the book into each book buyers' hands, but it really helps me if you can go to your local bookstore, wherever it is you get books, and ask them to order in a copy for you. And if you can get a few friends to do it at the same time, well, then they'll order some extras and it'll get out there. And that's really where I think the momentum will get moving on this book. But this book means a lot to me. It's my second majorly published nonfiction book number 4 or 5 in the grand scheme of things. But writing, publishing, and misinformation at dawn of AI really started when I lost my wife of 30 years, and she died in my arms suddenly for the second time. That's another story for another time. But Shiloh, my wife, had been my writing partner and my editor and my creative collaborator for ever since I started writing in the early 90s. And she was one of our generation's most talented writers that no one knows. I'm hoping someday I'll become popular enough that I'll be able to release some of her writing, with some editing and whatnot, and eventually get it out there. She was always there, whether it be, us working till 3 a.m. in the morning to hit a deadline that I needed to, or just brainstorming and plot twists, whatever it may be, character building, world building. She was always there. And when I lost her at a time where my momentum was just skyrocketing. I'd done my testimony in front of 12 million people. I'd just been on Anderson Cooper, Live in Studio, Morning Joe. I mean, just everywhere. And I don't have anything else. At that point, I couldn't even stand to and walk for more than 5 or 10 minutes at a time. It's a little better now, but I had no other options but to write. And I still don't really, realistically. And I couldn't let that momentum stop because Shiloh died, because my daughters are depending on me. And I just couldn't, it would be so easy to fall into that pit of despair and never crawl back out. But there were people depending on me, and I needed to do it. And my daughters need me too. So I started looking at other ways of doing things. And I thought about writing about AI before that happened, but this really sealed the deal. And this is a project that I, spent about a year and a half writing and editing, working closely with my editor, Caroline Usamano over at Skyhorse. And she's a voice that really believes in me. And so it's really about finding the words again as a writer after losing my creative collaborator for so many years. And then it's also about how AI is changing the industry already. We're not the ones who let the genie out of the bottle, but we are the ones who have to deal with what happens to the industry after this happens. And if we don't embrace it, in my thought process, in some limited capacity, we're going to be, washed out to sea. We're just going to be left behind. I think it's very much like how things were back in the 90s when the .com bubble hit. Those that really embraced the internet and the online world really within a few years and learned it inside and out, they were the ones calling the shots after a few years. And I think we're in a very historic period of time, much like that. But I think it's also needs to be handled with a great deal of care and ethics. And in this, I do have a manifesto, an ethical manifesto for writers and creatives in the AI age, where I talk about what it is I think we need to be aware of and very strict with as far as, how we approach using AI. And that's, for me, a collaborative approach. The core of writing, the soul of it needs to remain human. The actual sitting down and writing the story needs to be me sitting down at this desk and typing it out, just vomiting out onto the page. But I think we're going to be left behind if we don't use it for things like editing, for research, which it's much better now. And I go into these topics in the book about how to research and avoid hallucination, how to retain the human voice, how to, I go through my daily workflow using AI as a companion, as a sidekick, as someone that can help me be a better writer than I am currently without losing my soul to it, so that we can remain competitive with those corporations that no doubt, they're going to cut every corner they can, and they're going to screw us writers and creatives every chance they get, because that's their MO. That is the nature of this beast of corporate media. And these days have just illustrated that to great effect recently. So, yeah, that's the book. And I also actually create, because there wasn't one before, a citation system, which I call the Colorado Asimov ethical citation standard. And it's a way to embrace ethics in the AI age, a way for us to cite how we're using it exactly, which models we're using, and be transparent with our readers about how we do. If I use Otter AI to transcribe an interview that I had with someone that I'm writing an interview piece with, there's a way to disclose that. There's a way to, disclose that I did this brainstorming on this date. So I go into all of that, but really the core of this book is about loss at such a dynamic, critical time where the world is changing and upside down, and lost my only real partner in this world and had to keep moving forward. So it deals a lot with that loss and the healing and recovery that goes into that. And that's a many years long process. But I thought I'd just take the time during this relaunch of the podcast to just read a bit of my introduction of my book. And again, this is AI Inc. They are making an audiobook of it. This time I was able to sign off on the audio voice actor because my last book is just, those that follow my writing know my thoughts on that. But this time they allowed me to choose out of a selection. And I think I found a great voice actor who really captures that notion. And however long it takes them, probably a month or so. By the holidays, I would assume that the audiobook will be out on Audible, so you can check it out there. But I thought I'd just take a chance to read my introduction as kind of a primer to the standalone podcast series, video podcast probably, I'm not sure. Tell me what you think. If you think the podcast, the companion piece for AI Inc. should be just audio or have a video aspect as well. And I could always release, just an audio version and a video version as well. So if you like seeing my ugly mug while I'm doing these things, let me know, and I'll open up comments to my paid subscribers over on Substack. If you're finding this through some other way or friends send it to you, just Google the Colorado Switchblade. That's my own personal outlet, and you can find all my stuff there. And I always include links to articles I'm doing elsewhere, book projects, just media appearances, all the stuff that I got going on. You can find it at the Colorado Switchblade. So here we go. I'm going to just read the introduction to my new book, AI Inc. Not long ago, hiding away from the world in my Colorado bungalow, the wind sighing cold through the high mountain trees, I sat wrapped in loneliness and despair, facing one of the darkest and most challenging chapters of my life. The deadline for the revised edition of my first novel loomed closer by the day. If I didn't finish it in time for some last-minute sales, I'd have almost nothing for what would be my daughter's first Christmas without their mother, and the task felt insurmountable. Normally, I thrived under the pressure of a deadline, but this time was different. Just 2 months earlier, I had lost the love of my life, my sweetest friend, my wife of 30 years and mother of my daughters, my irreplaceable partner in life. As Shiloh lay in my arms for the last time, death silenced her, leaving a hole in my heart and taking with it my writing partner. Suddenly, I was alone, supporting our household, raising our daughters. With the first holidays fast approaching, everything felt darker than it ever had before. I needed to try something, anything, to give my daughters a Christmas with some light and warmth. I had to make it just a little better than it would be if we went through it penniless, as a funeral and everything that came with it had left us. One that wouldn't be remembered for the cold shadows stalking us from every corner of our home. In my darkest night of the soul, I came up with a plan. Release a revised edition of my first novel, host a holiday author dinner, and hold a book signing where I could sell tickets and maybe a case or two of books. It was the only way I could think of to bring in the money. But how could I get it all done? The edits, the rewrites. She had always been there to help me ever since I started publishing articles back in the 90s when we were young. A few years earlier, I'd finally published my first novel. It was a moment of celebration, a tangible manifestation of my dream to become an author that I could hold in my hand and speak to the world through. Participating in that magic that is writing a book. Shiloh had helped me at every step, from world building to character and plot development to final high polish edits. Throughout the process, I had my wife, my writing partner, to lean on and ask for help, someone who helped put the rhyme to my words and lifted me when my writing self-confidence faltered. She had always been the first to read my drafts, offering insights as sharp-edged as they were nurturing. Now I face the looming haunted task of revising the book alone, redesigning its cover, reworking the marketing, and writing the social media posts to advertise the event, all in hope it would reach the audience she believed it deserved, even when I barely had any hope left myself. The weight of grief, compounded by depression and trauma-laced flashbacks to that final moment, bore down on me, as did the financial uncertainty hanging over our future. The crazy bohemian life we had built, centered on art, writing, and expression, suddenly felt like a cracked and faltering foundation, one I now stood on alone. If I'm being honest, I wasn't sure I could pull it off. For the first time, I wondered if I should just quit writing. In the depths of that personal and professional pit, I turned to a collaborator I never thought I'd consider: artificial intelligence. The launch of ChatGPT had sent waves crashing across the world like a string of digital tsunamis. And despite my reservations, fueled by a lifetime of consuming dystopian science fiction, I wondered, could this technology help rescue me from drowning? Can an AI even come close to my late wife's creative and editorial insight? Could it help refine my prose, design a compelling book cover, or strategize a marketing plan? Could it help me become the writer she always believed I could be? Desperation makes for strange bedfellows, and what began as a tentative experiment quickly turned into a deep exploration of AI's potential. I started to see AI not as a replacement for human creativity, but as a tool to supercharge it, a creative companion with seemingly endless possibilities. This journey into AI's role in creative professions sparked the idea for this book. I realized that many of my fellow writers were also struggling to navigate this strange, brave new world we now find ourselves living in. Things are getting rough for writers, from shrinking advances to the gutting of newsrooms around the globe by vulture capital firms. One of our greatest fears is that even the meager ways we found to scrape by as purveyors of words might soon be taken from us by machines. That fear isn't unfounded, but we may have a short window to wield the very tool we fear, to turn it into a shield, a blade, a means of strengthening our creative armory before it's too late. This book isn't just about how I adapted and evolved in the face of cataclysmic change. It's a broader exploration of how AI is reshaping the landscapes of writing, publishing, journalism, education, and the integrity of information itself, for better or worse. As AI tools weave deeper into our daily lives, their impact on creative workflows, business models, and ethical boundaries has reached a critical point. AI Inc. explores these transformations, examining how AI can be used not to replace writers, but to empower them. Used wisely, AI can help generate ideas, craft narratives, manage publishing logistics, and take on the daunting challenges of misinformation. I also take a hard look at the ethical questions that come with this shift: authorship, transparency, bias, and creative integrity. This book is my attempt to map a path forward, one where we treat AI as a collaborator, a sidekick, not a substitute, where the human soul of storytelling remains intact, and those of us with fewer resources still have a fighting chance. So that's the introduction of my new book. Again, it's available now anywhere you buy books from Skyhorse Publishing. And yeah, I wanted to just talk about that. With that, that's pretty much everything that I wanted to go into. Right now, if you go check out my Amazon listing, there's only 9 copies left. So I'm not sure what that actually means. That might just mean that they bought 10 copies and they sold one, or it might be they had a decent chance. Actually, it said they only had 7 copies earlier, so they must have done another shipment. So I think it's at least sold 10 copies, maybe. I don't know. It's number 36 in the business aspects of writing or something like that when it first launched. And I think it's, somewhere in the top 100 or just thereabouts. It's not at 4 million anyway. We'll say that, like it was before the launch, and where all my other books are sitting. So yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to do. I wanted to just take a time to reintroduce the podcast to my Colorado Switchblade followers and subscribers, and tell you about what I've had going on, talk about the new direction with the podcast, with video. Hope to have an interview soon with John Vanessa from the Rocky Mountain Bullhorn, one of the first underground publications I ever worked with. And I'm always right now. I'm working diligently to finish up my next fiction book. I have maybe 100 pages left, probably less than that. The Propagandist Daughters, which takes place in a dystopian world, not too different from our own, but 30 years after a second civil war, where the United States has crumbled into a fractured set of alliances, the red alliances and the blue alliances, and starts in Colorado and weaves up through Wyoming and Montana and Idaho. It's kind of a cyberpunk dystopian meets Western in some places. And my beta readers all love it, and they are threatening to lynch me if I don't finish it soon, because I had to put that on pause after I signed the contract on AI Inc., but hoping to get some representation on that, maybe then a publisher. Otherwise, I'll put it out myself like I do my other fiction stuff. And yeah. And I just wanted to take a moment to say the world's rough right now, especially here in America. The government's still technically shut down. Air traffic's a mess. Our rights are vanishing in front of our eyes. If you're a writer who made a living off telling the truth, that may not be the same option to make a living anymore as it once was. EBT food stamps have been canceled. This affected my family as well. I had to hit a food bank for the first time in years, like since like in a decade or so. And it's rough, and we're going in a winter, and it's going to be a cold, hard, dark winter. So I think the key to counteracting that is just being kind to one another. I tell my daughter Lux all the time, just be nice to people. The world's a better place when you do. And right now, there's a lot of hurt and pain out there, and all of us are feeling it in some way or another. And we just need to take care of each other. So instead of signing off with my Stay Classy Colorado, I think it's Colorado, be kind to one another, because right now the world needs it. Thanks for watching, and I'll have another podcast out soon. Talk to you then.